World building is a very difficult thing to get right, but Avatar The Last Airbender does it exceptionally well. It's too easy to either include too little and have a world that feels like a bleak post-apocalyptic wasteland when you don't intend it to feel that way. Or you can, and people don't think about this a lot, include too much lore and have a world that feels like it's driven more by lore than by the characters and the themes of the work. It's possible to spend weeks studying the lore of Avatar The Last Airbender, but that lore never gets in the way. The world building always functions in conjunction with the character work, not opposed to it. And that is never more clearly the case than it is with the Water Tribes. In Season 1, the Southern Water Tribe has been reduced to a weak and broken civilization. This is compared to the grandiose and elegant Northern Water Tribe, which is basically Ice Venice. It has these involved systems of canals, and it has ancient, awe-inspiring structures like the Chief's Palace. When Sokka and Katara finally go to their sister tribe, they are in awe. However, Avatar The Last Airbender, to its credit, does not stop with this juxtaposition. It expands upon it and complicates it. How the relationship between the water tribes shifts in Avatar proper, the comics that succeed it, and The Legend of Korra is fascinating and nuanced. As importantly, it's intertwined with the personal journeys of our characters, most notably Sokka and Katara in the original show, but also Korra from The Legend of Korra. How the personal and sociological are interwoven is extremely compelling, and it's a major reason why this world building is so great. This is Avatar Explained, Water Tribe World Building Edition. The Southern Water Tribe is the first location we are introduced to. How one establishes a first location in a fantasy world is incredibly important. If you do it right, you hook the audience immediately. If you don't, and your first location is pedestrian, cliched, or just plain not interesting, you might lose your audience before you even have the opportunity to ingratiate them with your characters and themes. This is something that Avatar The Last Airbender absolutely gets right. First, there is the sheer beauty of the setting. Most polar locations in fiction are unrelentingly bleak. They are nothing but pure misery and suffering. But the Southern Water Tribe is different. Yes, it's cold, and yes, it is not the most comfortable place to be, but it is not inhospitable. As the show presents it, the worst thing about this place is not the weather or the temperature, but the abject loss of community. The tribe has been devastated by Fire Nation raids for the past century. What used to be a proud tribe has been reduced to a scarred and a terrified people. Avatar is not a series that shies away from the effects of war, and that is apparent from its very first episode, The Boy in the Iceberg, and its very first location, the Southern Water Tribe. There is another reason establishing a first location matters. It sets up the status quo of the work. This status quo can either be expanded upon or subverted, but it needs to be established. Everything builds off the foundation established by that first location, so it is great that the Southern Water Tribe provides such a strong foundation. Of the 5 major characters in Avatar The Last Airbender, those being Aang, Sokka, Zuko, Katara, and Toph, 2 of them, Katara and Sokka, are from the Southern Water Tribe, and Aang, the show's protagonist, is discovered in an iceberg near the Southern Water Tribe. This means that before the show even leaves the Southern Water Tribe, it has assembled a party of 3 characters. This means that the show going forward cannot be detached from the place in which it started. The Southern Water Tribe is not some video game tutorial area that can be forgotten about after the story progresses into the Great World. It's like the Shire. It's the kind of place that cannot be forgotten because it holds such an important place in the minds and hearts of the characters. Obviously, Aang has no strong connections to the place, as he only ended up there by accident, but Katara and Sokka carry it with them. Their lives before the events of Avatar: The Last Airbender continue to shape them, albeit in very different ways. Sokka has always wanted to be one of the warriors of his tribe. When all the men of the village go off to fight the Fire Nation, he is left behind. This is completely understandable, as he is only a little kid at the time, but it is still a crushing blow. He feels inadequate, and he compensates for this by trying his best to conform to the image of what a warrior should be. This is demonstrated well when he confronts Zuko after Zuko's ship lands at the Southern Water Tribe. After applying warrior face paint, he charges at Zuko. This is in the second ever episode of the show, The Avatar Returns. But we already know how this is going to end, even if Sokka doesn't. Sokka has already been established as kind of a joke. He's the kind of person who tries to train 5-year-olds for battle. Meanwhile, Zuko is a skilled warrior even without his bending. He easily defeats Sokka. Katara, however, has no illusions. She has no exaggerated image of herself. While Sokka pretends to be a brave and tough and strong warrior, Katara takes care of them both. Sokka cannot remember his mother's face. When he thinks about his mother, the only face that comes to mind is Katara's. She raised him, and although she is not resentful about this, she wants more out of life. She wants adventure, she wants to travel the world. As the only waterbender left in her tribe, she wants to go to the Northern Water Tribe to practice her skills and become better and truly learn what it means to be a waterbender. She prizes her waterbending even as Sokka mocks it. While she does have a strong place in her heart for her home, it is also the place where a lot of bad memories happened. Most poignantly, the death of Kaya, their mother, which hit her much harder than it hit Sokka. There are many reasons for this, among these being that Katara was closer to their mother from all appearances, and that Katara feels like she could have saved her mother if only she was older and stronger. But the most important one is arguably the simplest. Katara's personality is different from Sokka's. Katara never hides her emotions, rather she carries them with her wherever she goes. She's serious and empathetic. She always strives to do what's right, and the existence of injustice offends her on a deep and personal level. Sokka does not want to think about his mother's death, but Katara cannot stop thinking about it. I'm not saying Sokka doesn't care about doing what's right. He does, a lot, but he doesn't obsess over ethical questions the same way that Katara does. The pain of her mother's death fuels her. It's not as simple as the injustice of that death driving her to spread justice to the world. She does not consciously make that connection, but there is no doubt that the trauma of her mother's death helped shape her into the justice-seeking person she is today. This hatred of injustice becomes more relevant when she goes to the Northern Water Tribe. That the Northern Water Tribe is one of the most beautiful and imaginative locales in all of Avatar: The Last Airbender is less important than what it means to Katara personally. This grand place represents to her endless opportunity. She falls in love with the Northern Water Tribe, not just because she has always wanted to see it, and not just because she knows there are waterbending masters there, but also because she revels in the chance to see a water tribe that has not been devastated by the Fire Nation. It's not quite her culture, as there are distinct differences between the Northern and Southern Water Tribes, but she feels a close kinship with it nonetheless. This is until she meets Master Pakku, a sullen sexist who refuses to train her. This storyline is a little clunky in execution, but the whole idea of Pakku breaking down this idealized picture of the Northern Water Tribe she has in her mind is viscerally painful. She eventually convinces Pakku to teach her waterbending, but even before she learns from him, she's nearly able to best him. While she does learn a lot from Pakku, her greatest asset in the end is not him or waterbending scrolls, but her own personal determination to become a great waterbender. The Northern Water Tribe doesn't help her as much as she helps herself. Sokka experiences a similar sense of disappointment. He meets a beautiful young woman, Princess Yue, and falls in love with her. Thus begins a storyline that may be a shade melodramatic, but is nonetheless heartfelt and earnest. At first, he thinks she won't like him because of class differences, but she does fall in love with him. The reason they cannot be together is because she is engaged to someone else. Nevertheless, he is assigned to protect her, so he's crushed when he cannot do that, and she dies to revive the moon spirit. They leave the Northern Water Tribe at the start of Season 2, but it still leaves its mark on them. Sokka cannot forget Yue. When they are in the swamp in episode 204, Katara has a vision of her mother, and Aang has a vision of Toph, whom he has not met at this point of his life, but Sokka has a vision of Yue. All his anxieties about not being able to save her resurface. His reluctance to believe in the supernatural, despite seeing his girlfriend literally transform into the moon, may be comedic, but there is a darker side to them. One could take them as him rejecting the supernatural, despite the flimsiness of his case for its non-existence, because of what happened to Yue. He wants to try to blot that trauma out, but he can't. The mark of the Northern Water Tribe stays with Katara too, and not just because it transformed her into a great bender and made her more confident in herself. Before she leaves, Pakku passes on to her a vial of water from the Spirit Oasis. This spiritual water can heal any wound, no matter how serious. This water is not mentioned for the rest of the season, but Chekhov's gun dictates that the spirit water be used. You don't introduce something like that, then not use it. Not if you're the talented storytellers of Avatar: The Last Airbender. So it is brought up twice in the Season 2 finale, The Crossroads of Destiny. The first time is when Katara is in prison with Zuko and Ba Sing Se. She starts off hating him, but gradually she realizes he is not the evil monster she thought he was. Rather, he is confused. He's struggling. He doesn't know what to do or where to go, but he is determined to change for the better. So she offers to heal his scar with the water from the oasis. Of course, that doesn't happen. Before she can, Aang and Iroh find and rescue them. Zuko and Iroh go one way, Aang and Katara go another. Before long, Zuko chooses to betray his uncle and Katara, joining Azula instead and abandoning his quest of redemption. Katara uses her spirit water to save Aang's life when he's struck down by Azula's lightning. Had it not been for her, the entire Avatar cycle would have ended. The Avatar never would have been reborn. However, because she saves his life, she has no more Spirit Oasis water. Before the final battle in the Sozin's Comet 4-parter, Aang asks her if she has any, but she responds that she doesn't. This raises the stakes. Aang knows that if he dies in the final battle against Ozai, he's not coming back. Katara and Sokka do not interact with the Northern Water Tribe again until after the end of the series, with the lone exception of them meeting Master Pakku right before the final battle. In the comic trilogy North and South, that takes place a year or two after the end of the series, the stark differences in power between the North and the South that caused so many problems in The Legend of Korra become apparent, with the North trying to colonize the South. Because of the cultural similarities between the two tribes, it's not quite like a European country planting its flag all over the world, but nonetheless, Southerners worry about their culture being lost. Katara is desperate to defend every element of Southern tradition, while Sokka is more open to change, but they are both opposed to the prospect of their homeland being colonized. They defeat both the colonists and the arch-nationalists. Katara is the one with the character arc in North and South. She has to come to terms with the fact that her homeland has changed, and it's not going back. It will never be like she wanted it. Her ideal is ultimately unattainable. The Southern Water Tribe will never be like it was when she was a kid, because her mother was there when she was a kid. So her coming to terms with how the Southern Water Tribe has changed is also her coming to terms with the death of her mother. Finally, she has achieved inner peace, and she understands that some of the changes coming to the Southern Water Tribe are good. There are 2 new waterbenders. They are the first to be born in the tribe since Katara, and she helps them accept their new skills and show these skills to the rest of the tribe. However, the imbalance of power between the water tribes does not go away. We see in Season 2 of The Legend of Korra that the northern tribe is far more powerful, and they use that power to forcibly annex the southern tribe. The storyline receives a lot of criticism, much of it rightly deserved and having to do with the utter blandness of Unalaq as a villain, but from a world-building perspective, it's actually quite smart. The South, because of its lack of resources and manpower, has to appeal to Republic City for support. This would be less of a problem if Republic City's president had even the slightest hint of backbone, but he doesn't. He is President Raiko, and nothing matters to him except getting re-elected. Supporting the Southern rebels would compromise his ties with the more powerful North, and that would earn him a great deal of backlash, so he stays neutral instead. Amazingly, even when Korra tells him near the end of the season that the very existence of the world may be threatened if he does not take action and send troops to the south, he continues to refuse. This is not just incompetence, he is complicit in the rise of Unavatu and the crazy kaiju battle that takes place at the end of Season 2. His incompetence does have one upside, however. It forces Korra to look inside herself and come to her own conclusions. She has to derive her own solutions. This is how the water tribes function in both series. They are not examples of world building for the sake of giving fans an enormous mountain of lore to sort through. Instead, the world building is integral to the characters and the narrative. It's always essential. There are very few bits of world building that could be removed concerning the Southern Water Tribe without undermining the integrity of the characters and the themes. Avatar: The Last Airbender understands the most important truth about world building. It's not about making as big a world as possible. It's about creating a world that facilitates and advances the growth of narrative beats and character relationships. If your world building is cool, good. If it's smart, good. If it's savvy, good. But above all that, it needs to be irreplaceable. The water tribes are not the only examples of this in Avatar: The Last Airbender, but they are the clearest and best examples. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more content like this. Keep watching Avatar. It is a fantastic show with so many nuances. And tune in soon for the next Avatar Explained video. I swear it will be coming soon. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.